This is the first Advent candle, the candle of hope. This is the second candle of Advent. It's the candle of faith. This is the third candle of Advent. It symbolizes joy. It is also called the shepherd's candle. To the shepherd's great joy, the angels announced that Jesus came for humble, unimportant people like them too. In liturgy, the color rose signifies joy. We beseech thee to listen to our prayers, O Lord, and by the grace of thy coming, enlighten our darkened minds with the joy that only comes from you. Thou who livest and reignest with God the Father in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. Amen.
Could we have the worship team come forward for the call to worship, please?
In the Green Book.
Something good is bound to happen, for the Spirit of Jesus is in this place.
That was lovely. Let us pray. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. Our first hymn, number 84, It Came Upon the Midnight Clear, 84.
with peaceful wings unfurled, and still their heavenly music floats o'er all the weary world. Above its sad and lowly plains, they bend on hovering wing, and ever o'er its babble sounds the blessed angels sing. And ye beneath life's crushing load, whose forms are bending low, who toil along the climbing way with painful steps and slow. Look now for bread and golden hours come swiftly on the wing. Oh, rest beside the weary road and hear the angels sing. For lo, the days are hastening on, by prophet bards foretold, when with the ever-circling years comes round the age of gold, when peace shall over all the earth its ancient splendors fling, and the whole world gives back the song which now the angels sing. Amen.
Please be seated we're going to do an Old Testament reading the same way we do our Psalm readings. In other words, I will begin with Isaiah 12, chapter 12, verse 2, and continue with the even, and you respond with the odd. So this is Isaiah 12, verses 2 through 6. Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation.
With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation.
In that day you will say, give thanks to the Lord. Call on his name. Make known among the nations what he has done, and proclaim that his name is exalted.
Sing to the Lord, for he has done glorious things. Let this be known to all the world.
Shout aloud and sing for joy, people of Zion, for great is the Holy One of Israel among you. Our next hymn, number 89, Thou Didst Leave Thy Throne, 89.
Camest to earth for me. But in Bethlehem's home was there found no room for thy holy nativity. Oh, come to earth, and in greatest humility. Oh, come to my heart, Lord Jesus. There is room in my heart for thee. The foxes found rest, and the birds their nests in the shade of the forest tree. But thy couch was the Son of the Son of God in the deserts of Galilee. Oh, come to my heart, Lord Jesus. There is room in my heart for thee. Thou camest, O Lord, with a living word that should set thy people free. But with mocking scorn and with crown of thorn, they bore thee to Calvary. Oh, come to my heart, Lord Jesus. There is room in my heart for thee. When the heavens shall ring and the angels sing at thy coming to victory, let thy voice call thee home, saying, yet there is room at my side for thee. My heart shall rejoice, Lord Jesus, when thou comest and callest for me.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him, all the heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Please be seated for special music.
Remember, 1 and 4 all the way through. And 4. Yeah.
That was marvelous. Thank you.
The epistle reading this morning is from Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 7. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. The Gospel is Luke chapter 3, verses 7 through 18. John said to the crowds coming to be baptized by him, "You brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the coming wrath? Produce fruit in keeping with repentance, and do not begin to say to yourselves, 'We have Abraham as our father,' for I tell you that out of these stones God can raise up children for Abraham. The axe is already at the root of the trees, and every tree that does not produce good fruit will be cut down and thrown into the fire." "What should we do then?" the crowd asked. John answered, "The man with 2 tunics should share with him who has none, and the one who has food should do the same." Tax collectors also came to be baptized. "Teacher," they asked, "what should we do?" "Don't collect any more than you are required to," he told them. Then some soldiers asked him, "And what should we do?" He replied, "Don't extort money and don't accuse people falsely. Be content with your pay." The people were waiting expectantly and were all wondering in their hearts if John might possibly be the Christ. John answered them all, "I baptize you with water, but one more powerful than I will come, the thongs of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and with fire. His winnowing fork is in his hand to clear his threshing floor and to gather the wheat into his barn, and he will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire." And with many other words, John exhorted the people and preached the good news to them. The word and gospel of the Lord.
This is the third week of Advent, and today we lit the candle which symbolizes joy, called the shepherd's candle. And what a blessing to stop for a moment and ponder joy and what that means. And so thinking about the idea of joy, remember, of course, that when the angels made their announcement to the shepherds out with their flocks, that, great tidings, great joy is what the angels were saying. And that there was this just fabulous the angelic choir and the angels were singing, and just this opening between heaven and earth happened right in front of the shepherds. And it was just a massive, just an incredible display in terms of visual, I'm sure, but also the sound must have been fabulous, that sort of thing. And so I think it pays for us to really consider the situation for the individuals, the shepherds. Now, I talked last week about how that there was in Bethlehem this special class of shepherds who were specifically trained. Perhaps some of them even were priests, but they were specially trained, and it was their responsibility to raise the lambs without spot or blemish for the coming Passover sacrifice. Now, interestingly, the time of lambing for this flock was different from normal because of the need for the lambs at Passover time. And so it would have been sometime around late December that would have been lambing season for these lambs that were part of what they call the tower flock. So what is it like, what would it have been like for people that how do they live their lives, and how different was it from what we experienced, that sort of thing. And so some interesting facts that at that time, the average life expectancy was about 20 years, and there was a shocking amount of infant mortality. 50% of the children died before the age of 2. At any given time, 25% of the population would be deathly ill or dying anytime, 25%, a quarter. And there would be the idea of there being societal order, and it would have been foreign to them. People lived their lives surrounded by crime, prostitution, sickness, death, no constitution, no Bill of Rights, no balance of power, no police, firefighters, just you've got these Roman soldiers that would come and like steal everything you had if they were having a bad day, or take your donkey, which is the one thing of value that you owned, or they would, do whatever, and there was no recourse. There was just, they'd come and do it, and there's nothing you could do about it. There was no fairness, there was no rights, there was nothing of that nature. No schools, teachers, no school counselors, no doctors or hospitals. Get this, except for the wintertime temperatures, no refrigeration. And no heat really, even except to start your own fire. Infectious disease was rampant, and abuse in the family and in the home was rampant. So it was, and so when there was change, it wasn't that like a governmental change, there'd come a war, a lot of people would die, and then another government would come in and they'd be just as bad or worse as the one before. And so this is the type of life that people experienced at that time. So you can imagine, life isn't real happy at this time, and happy is kind of an interesting word. And joy, I think, would be kind of hard to come by for a lot of people. And that's the life of most of the people. There probably 3% of the population were extremely well-to-do. 5% were merchants that serviced the very, very wealthy, and everybody else was dirt poor. That was reality back then. And like I said, average life expectancy about 20 years, not much. And just sort of the moral tenor of the time, there's a letter that we still have, actually, it's in a museum, from a Roman official in Egypt to his wife who was in Rome. She was pregnant with their first child. The letter, it has language of beautiful emotions. The man for his wife deeply missed his wife, beautifully expressed, just the type of thing that you'd expect. And he wanted to be with her for the birth of their child, but so this is the letter. We could still look at it in the museum at this time from 2,000 years ago. So he wanted to be with her for the birth of their child, and he said, if it's a baby boy, then that is best. If it's a girl, do what you must to get rid of it. That was life back then. And so this gives you a little bit of a sense of the hearts and the minds of the people in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. This is the life that they lived. And so they invested a lot of their time, but their hope in what God promised he would do in bringing a Messiah, the Messiah, not a Messiah, but the Messiah to them. That was the light in their life, was their hope for the Messiah. And so there was some very powerful predictions in the Old Testament, in the Bible that these people read. Of course, New Testament hadn't been written yet. There was powerful hope, and a lot of it did center around Bethlehem. Apparently there were 2 Bethlehems. There was one up in Galilee, but there was this one Bethlehem that was right near Jerusalem. I've described how Bethlehem is actually set up a little bit different than our Christmas card picture of it. Bethlehem itself is up on a hill, and the pastures that you would find the sheep would be actually down below them. And in Jesus' time, the time of Jesus' birth, there was a tower, actually a tower, meaning it was a 2-story building, whether it was made of stone, which is very possible. A lot of these buildings were made of stone. It might have been made of wood, but who knows. So at the upper part, the shepherd priests there was a little balcony, they could walk around and they could see the sheep out in their pasture down below them. The tower, of course, kind of elevated their view. They could see quite a distance from there. And so they could go and walk around upstairs on the second floor, and they could look and they could see their sheep. And of course, there would be their helpers that would be out there with the sheep too. And so that's the second story. Now, get this. The first story was a stable. And so that's where the sheep would be, the mama sheep would be. And I don't know if you know much about being with animals, that sort of thing, but when you have them all, like 20 or 30 of them all together, and let's say, I would walk into that particular stable, that particular place. Of course, the sheep would sort of run away, push against each other, shove, knock other sheep over, that kind of thing, to sort of run away from. Really, I'm not that frightening, I don't think, but I can imagine them running away from me. Anyways, so there was a problem with that, because when these sheep would lamb, their little babies had to they had to keep them for a period of about 3 months, that their little babies would have to be protected in some special way. Otherwise, the little babies would get stepped on, scratched, bumped, bruised, and so they would be therefore not able to be used and not considered without spot or blemish. So the people that worked with these animals had to be super, super, super careful about the condition of these little lambs. So get this, I just think this is so interesting. So what these shepherds would do is lambing time would come, and they would actually grab the lambs, and then they would swaddle the lambs and put them in the manger, a stone manger, in this tower, that the stable that the flock was at. Now, biblically speaking, we know that there was no room for Jesus, Joseph, and Mary in the inn, so they had to be in a stable, and it is quite possible that what they did was they actually had to go to this tower, and they were in the stable of the tower downstairs, and the very same place where these swaddled lambs would be put when they're very, very young and they were being protected, that's where Jesus was laid. And so when the angel Gabriel says to the shepherds, hey guys, you go and find, this will be a sign for you that there will be a babe in swaddling clothes laying in the manger, the shepherds would say, wow. And so they knew where to look. They knew exactly where to look. So it wasn't any great mystery. I thought that, initially I thought they were going to have to run around all Bethlehem and sort of look at all the stables and look at all the different places. But in fact, these guys knew where to look. They were out in the fields. I'm talking about the shepherds who saw the angel speak in the great annunciation, good tidings, great joy to you, a Savior is born. That news, when that came out, those shepherds that heard that, they ran back to the stable under the tower, and they found Jesus where the lambs would normally be placed. He was swaddled just like the lambs, and he was in the manger just like the lambs that would be sacrificed at Passover. Why is this important? It just shows that there is so much detail that God got right in making this whole thing happen, bringing about the birth of Jesus, Savior of the world, Lamb of God. First time John the Baptist saw Jesus as an adult was at his baptismal time, and he said, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. That's what John the Baptizer said about Jesus. And what is so wonderful, so lovely about this, and so this is why this is an Advent. This is why we celebrate Advent. It is the beginning and the unveiling of something incredibly momentous. It's a special moment in all of creation, all of human history, and all of that the Advent is happening, that this special, special moment is finally coming to pass, and that there is this beautiful moment with Jesus, who, like the lambs that were swaddled, was also himself swaddled. And like the lambs that would eventually go to the Passover sacrifice, he too was laid in a manger, not in a cradle, which you would expect for a baby, but in a manger, because the manger itself was out of the way of the other animals, and that the baby in the manger would be safe from the other animals. And that picture of beauty and protection and completeness, but also the huge identification that there is between Jesus as a baby and that identification, that similarity with the lambs also that were being born as the Passover sacrifice, that Jesus, who took away the sin of the world and the sins of the world, was treated very, very much like the lambs. Now, can I say absolutely that's how it happened? I can't say absolutely that's how it happened, but from the research that I have done, there are so many indicators that make this whole thing line up, that Jesus was, in fact, when he was born, that he was treated much the same as the Passover lambs that were born. And isn't that remarkable, that as confusing and difficult and just bizarre sometimes that life can be, that there was such a precise order to the way God brought about the birth of Jesus, that there was such a precise order and a pattern that he was establishing, and that he was doing things in a certain way, and that the salvation that was offered from God at that moment, that the salvation that Jesus was offering through his life was being declared not just in words and not just in songs and angels, but by the very circumstance of the life of Jesus and the way that he was born, there was such tremendous alignment and such tremendous beauty and meaning that through this whole thing. So this is why we have joy in Christmas, because God's hand is so clearly on the events that happened. And God is telling us a story about Jesus, but he's telling us a story about us and about humanity and about his plans for us. And he's saying in the most amazing way, I've got this. I've got this. Trust me. And so our joy as Christians, as followers of Jesus, is based on what God is doing, what God has done, and especially the beautiful sacrifice, the beautiful way that he arranged the birth of Jesus, and the power of that story to us. We revisit it every year at Christmas time, but that power comes back to us, that we can be joyful in the face of complexity, that we can be joyful in the face of some danger, we can be joyful in the face of challenges, because we know that God has his hand all over this. Amen? Our last hymn is number 90, the First Noel.
Noel, Noel. For Bethlehem it took its rest, and there it did both stop and stay, right over the place where Jesus lay. Noel, 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 Lord is the King of Israel. Then entered in those wise men three, full reverently upon their knee, and offered there in his presence their gold and myrrh and frankincense. Noel, 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 Lord is the King of Israel.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord to make his face to shine upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.